This is our weekly Sports in the News segment. We have a number of topics we're going to cover. The first of them is Michael Sam. Michael Sam, most sports fans know, several months ago, was a Missouri in the SEC football player that announced that he was a homosexual. And then said that he didn't want his sexual preference to be part of the equation as to who he is. So how many guys that played football last year that announced for the draft, we have Scott and Aaron here both with us, how many came out and announced that they were heterosexual and said that they didn't want their heterosexuality to be part of identifying them and their careers in the NFL?
Zero. I didn't hear one.
All right, so we're stretching credulity just a touch when we come out with reporters and do a national piece saying that I'm unusual. I'm part of the 1% of Americans that are homosexual, but I don't want my homosexuality to in any way influence who I am. Michael Sam was drafted, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's drafted by the Rams.
Okay. And what round was that, fellas?
The 7th and final round.
Okay. And he was drafted, do you have any idea what position he was drafted?
I think it was 4th or 5th to last. Very low.
Right. Yeah, 249th. You know what the 253rd draft each year is called?
256 is every year.
Okay. What's he called?
Mr. Irrelevance.
Mr. Irrelevant. You're right. It's 256. Mr. Irrelevant. So he's 7 from being irrelevant. Does ESPN have cameras on draft picks in the 7th round in their homes, wherever they may be?
Generally, no.
They do have cameras on those who are drafted in the 1st round, and many of those drafted in the 2nd round. But by the time they get to the 7th round, are they just with cameras here, there, and everywhere, hoping to catch the surprise person?
No, not normally. But they made such a big deal about him when he initially came out that you knew they were going to do it. You knew they were going to put a camera on him.
Yep. Now, the reason that he ended up being a 7th rounder versus earlier is he had a horrible showing at the NFL Combine.
Yeah, in addition to that, I mean, he's too small for the position that he wants to play and too slow for the positions that he could play at that size, which is why he wasn't projected to be a very high round pick.
He's a tweener, and the issue is that because he came out today and he said, "Oh, I should have went in the 3rd round." But here's the problem: is that because he was an All-American, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, but those are things that are media. A media outlet looks at those and they vote on those. And what they do is you're just looking at a stat line. So when I tell you that this guy plays in the SEC and he had 19 tackles for a loss, 11.5 sacks. Those are good numbers. You say, okay, those are good numbers. But a scout, this is where a scout is way different than the media, is he has to go in and look at those games. And when he look at those games, he got 9 sacks. He had 3 sacks each game against Florida, who was not a good team. Alabama State, who tell me,
we're not talking about Alabama here. We're talking about Alabama State.
Yeah, we're talking about Alabama State. Tell me, give me a player on Alabama State, and then Vanderbilt. So he's not. When you get a majority of sacks in 3 games against lesser competition, something as a scout, something doesn't sit well there. And the other thing is that you got to remember that in the NFL, you have people that have been accused of murder, rape, convicted of assault, gun charges, possession of numerous illegal substances, and that includes their owners, dog fighting. You got guys that are multiple DUI guys. and probably any other crime imaginable that you can think of between jaywalking,
shooting bomb in an airport.
Yeah, so
not a 49er fan,
but. All these guys, if you can play and you show on tape that you can play, they will pick you.
They will pick you.
They will pick you, and they will find a spot for you.
Right.
So,
even if you're controversial, like you, Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel, extraordinarily into himself and a self-promoter, but the man can play. I mean, he's got a really lively arm. He's a competitor. He is elusive. He's fast. And so, he's picked in the first round because he can play, and yet he comes with baggage. In fact, Dallas had him at as the best player available when it was time for them to pick in the first round, and chose not to pick him just because of the circus that he would bring to town. But it proves your point. In the NFL, they don't care who you are, if you can help them win games.
Exactly. And he said at one point in time he wanted to be known simply as a football player and not as some sort of trailblazer. Yeah. If he thinks he is the first gay man to play in the NFL, he is
crazy.
Absolutely ridiculous. He is the first gay man to make a story about him being gay.
Right. In fact, there was a player, I think he was a Washington Redskin. I don't know the man's name. But he was either a fullback or a running back, I believe, or it might have been a tight end. But anyway, it's a skill position with the Washington Redskins. Supposed to be very popular, really handsome guy. And he was, with his teammates, openly homosexual. He when the teammates would have him over to parties and the wives would come, he'd say, I'm going to bring my boyfriend. Is that all right with you guys? But lovable guy. Everybody knew, and nobody cared.
His name
That's
was
the difference
Jerry
because
Smith. He was a tight end.
Okay, tight end. Jerry Smith. And I think Jerry Smith was a little before my time, and I wasn't a Washington Redskin fan at the time. From everything I can hear, the guy was popular with his teammates, popular with the fans, genuinely good player, and it didn't make a difference because he didn't wear it on his sleeve. That's the difference today. Now homosexuality is being worn as a badge of honor because it's being promoted at universities as an enlightened and honorable behavior.
And they're presenting it in a way that if I don't acknowledge that if I just say Michael Sam is not a good football player, and I don't acknowledge that he's gay, then I'm doing a disservice to him. I don't feel like that's a disservice to Michael Sam. I think
he made something unusual be part of the equation, and one's prowess in the bedroom should not in any way enter the discussion in sports, and yet this guy made it impossible for us to ignore it, including when he was picked just 6 places before Mr. Irrelevant. There he was in front of the camera, kissing his boyfriend.
Well, and if you're afraid that coming out as gay is going to hurt your draft stock, you wait until after the draft. Then he would have been drafted at the spot that the scouts and teams think that his physical abilities let him go to.
You know where I think he would have been drafted?
Probably
I don't think he would have been drafted. I think that knowing that their 7th round pick is so unlikely to make the team, that St. Louis to make a statement picked him. I don't think he would have been drafted.
Well, here you go. To make your point, another All-American, Jackson Jeffcoat, played for DN for Texas, and he had 13 sacks. 19 of those were for loss, and he went undrafted, and he is 6'5" and 245 pounds.
Yeah, in the NFL you can be undersized, but you better be unbelievably fast and athletic, or you can be unbelievably big and slow. But you can't have you can't be a tweener where you're not fast and you're not big. So that's my conclusion as well. But the thing that really was bothersome to me about it is there was the player on the Dolphins who was said of the kiss between two men that was terrible. And player's been sanctioned. I mean, he's had all sorts of penalties come down on him, with everybody touting this idea that the player who was turned off by the homosexual kiss being televised is the bad guy. So you can't express that's a highly normal male reaction without being chastised in today's world.
I guess the issue that I had with the kiss, if it would have been just like every other guy that got drafted, to where he stood up, him and they kissed their mom, and then he'd give his girlfriend or his significant other or his wife or whoever it may be
a peck on the cheek,
a quick peck, just a quick peck. This one was such a forced, in your face, I'm making out with my boyfriend right now thing, and
as a 7th round draft pick, where the cameras do not go.
And which is fine if they're in the privacy of their own home, but the fact that they have a national camera right there and that they choose that this is what we're going to do. If I saw a man and a woman do that same thing, I'd be like, okay, what are you doing? Let's show. I would say these exact words. Let's show some class.
Right, and that's what the point of view was of the Miami football player. Well, that's just not classy. Now, and another retired NFL player says, I got my kid watching this game, and now he's sitting there asking me, hey, Dad, why are two guys kissing? It's an uncomfortable situation, and we've tried to make it heroic because guess what? The President of the United States sent him a letter. Immediately there, the President congratulates Michael Sam, the Rams and the NFL, for taking an important step forward today in our nation's journey. I mean, come on. That is so ridiculously over the top that it's heroic. It's an important step. It's part of our national's journey. It's a step forward. When your sexuality is abnormal and you make it part of your persona in sports. I would take the same position with Joe Willie Namath. Joe Willie Namath made his womanizing part of his persona. I didn't find it attractive. I didn't want any part of it. Didn't want to see Joe Willie Namath wearing pantyhose either. I've got a couple of more comments on all of this. One of them, Scott raised during the break. What does the second of President Obama's two lines sound like? What did the President of the United States say regarding Michael Sam?
From the playing field to the corporate boardroom, LGBT Americans prove every day that you should be judged by what you do and not who you are.
So there's two issues with it. One is, of course, that the Michael Sam was making an issue of who he is, homosexual, as opposed to what he can do. And second, when have we reached a point when your sexual preference defines you? I've stated here in the show for the first time ever, probably was obvious since I've been married for 30 years, that I'm a heterosexual male, and it ought not ever matter. I've been doing this program for over 2 years, and there's never been an instance where we're describing my sexual preference other than to say, I'm opposed to pedophilia, I'm opposed to rape, I'm opposed to sexually abusing women. Why I just don't understand how sexual preference in one's own life ought to define an individual.
I think the counter-argument would be that the people that are treated differently because they're homosexual feel that they're being defined just by that.
But, you know, if they weren't... I have hired, because I've had companies with thousands of employees. But during the times when the companies were smaller and I was actually myself in charge of hiring, I have knowingly hired many homosexual men and women. From a business point of view, I really didn't care so long as the individual wasn't wearing it as a defining aspect of their nature. The only place where heterosexuals typically get, and this would be the vast preponderance, there's always a nasty undercurrent, but most places where heterosexuals are bothered by homosexuality is only when it's flaunted in their face, when it is being touted as something that is normal and that should be viewed in a superior way. So when Michael Sam touts it and throws it in my face, I'm bothered by it. If it was, oh, by the way, Michael Sam happens to be homosexual, then I wouldn't care. So it's only when they define themselves that way and wear it as this defines me, neon lights, that those that are bothered by it are bothered.
Here's a hypothetical for you. What if you never knew Michael Sam was gay, and he was projected to go in the third round, and he was, a vibrant character. So ESPN had somebody there, and he gets drafted, and him and his boyfriend, he gets drafted, and his boyfriend gives him a hug and gives him that quick peck on the cheek, and he gives him a quick peck back.
Yeah.
And that's how we see he's gay.
Yes. I would personally turn away while the peck is happening. I just don't like seeing guys. I don't watch sports for sexual content, so I would have turned away by that moment, but I wouldn't have cared. At that point, I'd say, all right, so it's 1% of society is homosexual. There's 200 and some odd guys selected here. We would naturally assume if this is a cross-section of America that 2 to 3 of them are going to be homosexual. I wouldn't care.
I feel like I'd be the same way. I think my thought would just be, so he
wouldn't care.
He's gay.
Would not care. Now, I'm kind of a Putin-esque individual in this regard. Putin passed a law that says you can be homosexual. You can do whatever you want in the privacy of your own home. You can be as homosexual as you wish to be. In fact, even out in the street, if you want to hold hands and smooch, that is your business. But if you try to make your sexual orientation a cause célèbre politically, then we have a problem. And that's kind of where I stand on this whole issue. I don't care what people choose to do. I just don't want it flaunted. I don't want it thrown in my face.
Yeah, I wasn't bothered by the kiss at all. I mean, when you say presented abnormal, it doesn't strike me as that abnormal, really. It just, it happened. His whole story will go away at some point.
Yeah, we'll have Glenn on our next segment, but one last thought. When Brett Favre, who was one of my favorite football players, married man, took a picture of his ding-a-ling and tried to text it to a cheerleader for the New York Jets to solicit favors, I was not only not impressed, I chose to no longer be a fan. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We are going to change the subject to another sexual issue. This happens to be heterosexual sex between a 80-year-old man and a 20-something-year-old girl. First, before we introduce it, we are going to hear Glenn's comment, but what would you call an individual who is, put in quotes, dating a married man who is 3 to 4 times older than she is when she is induced to do so with $1.8 million worth of trinkets?
I believe the polite word would be prostitute.
Okay. With that said, hello, Glenn. Welcome.
Hello, Yana. Hello. Is it Scott there as well?
Yes,
Scott
sir.
and Aaron. You've got the whole cast of characters at your disposal.
Okay. Well, I did want to hit some of the sports thing. There's so many things. Well, first of all, in a recent job interview, I made it clear that in no way did I want the fact that my girlfriend was a transsexual Ethiopian Jew to figure into the equation.
Well, that's nice of you to throw that out so they wouldn't consider it.
I wanted them not to be thinking about that, so I made a point of mentioning it.
Okay, that was. But by the way, how is that any different than what Michael Sam did? Of course, it isn't. I know. Yeah, your point exactly. Yeah, it's point exactly. Well taken.
I have made a note about your girlfriend.
Yeah. By the way, we have made a note, and when you call this program in future times, I have instructed Aaron, and he has agreed that we will not ever elevate your status or postpone you because of the fact that you have an Ethiopian Jewish girlfriend. I think there's another aspect of her background too. That you,
transsexual, yeah.
Oh, transsexual. That she was a trans. Well, but by the way, if she's a transsexual, is she a he or is he a she?
Well,
or does that matter? Or does that matter?
I'm appalled. I'm offended that you would ask.
I believe the answer is yes.
Hey, do you know how many transgender? I looked this up today because the story that we're going to be reporting in future weeks is buried right now. But the Secretary of Defense said that he's going to rewrite the strategy as to how the armed forces deals with transgender applicants into the Army. And I was saying transgender applicants. I mean, I couldn't imagine there could be more than like 50 of them, in a nation of 300 and some odd million people. Do you know how many people in America claim to be transgender?
No.
Yeah, 700,000.
Oh my goodness!
Yes.
That's overwhelming. It's amazing.
It's amazing. So it does make your story credible.
Yeah. Well, and nor do I want the fact that I'm a majority stockholder in the radio network to figure in at all.
Okay. Okay. All right. We will not feel bullied.
That may have more effect with me.
Also, another good response to Let's Serve Some Class would also be Get a Room. That's a good old one.
Oh, yeah. Get a room. It used to be, in fact, it's even now a slogan for an internet hotel booking firm. But, Get a Room was what we often would say to our friends and also to strangers when they were going overboard with public displays of sexuality, and it was 99.999% heterosexual, but we'd all say, hey, come on, just get a room. You want to do that, that's your business, but get a room.
When I was a student security guard at my Christian college, I could actually write students up for, over excessive public displays of affection.
That's also pretty well. My youngest son spent a couple of years at a Christian college in chemistry, and they actually had a document. It was a no canoodling policy that you were forbidden to have any sexual liaison with a female or male partner, and you were even prohibited from having a boy or girl. Person of the opposite sex, no matter what you were, unless you're transgender, of course, then it's confusing, in your room after like 10 o'clock at night, and if they were in your room during the day, your door had to be open, or you were subject to being expelled.
That's still a fairly common policy from what I've heard.
Yeah, I have 1 foot on the floor at all times. Yeah. But, I didn't think it was totally inappropriate. So it's like, people are like sucking face in the dormitory lounge and making other people uncomfortable. Hey guys, come on, get a room, have some class,
yes.
Whatever. By the way, there are a great many 20-somethings listening who have no idea, A, who Joe Namath is, and B, why he would be wearing pantyhose.
Yeah, that's probably true, but I did announce that I was giving my perspective as an old guy. So I was.
Exactly. I vividly remember the pantyhose.
Right. Okay. I'm trying to build our demographics with fellow old guys.
I gotcha. Okay. About Mr. Irrelevant also, you know what they call the guy who graduates at the bottom of his med school class?
Doctor.
Yeah, yes,
exactly. At the bottom of his West Point class, you know, that's...
Yes, exactly.
I thought at least the irrelevant guy got a contract, though, you know. But,
this is true. There's actually been a 3 or 4 Mr. Irrelevants that have actually made the team and played for a number of years. The last, however, was a punter, so I'm not really sure that counts.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they still do the Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, they make a jersey for him that says that and everything. It just seems really odd to me.
He gets a whole feast thrown in his honor. There's a organization that actually throws a large celebratory party, and the city, you know, shuts down for an hour to honor Mr. Irrelevant. You know, Mr. Irrelevant, that's a big deal in the draft.
What if I'm Michael Sam? I'm upset I didn't get picked 10 picks later.
Well, I know with the military academies, the guys who are near the bottom get into a game where they try and, like, throw just enough points on their quizzes and tests to have to hold the bottom position. So they have to be careful not to miscalculate and fail out, you know?
Yes.
But anyway, enough of that. About you were undoubtedly accused of being homophobic for asserting that, like, you know, guys, no one gets a normal male reaction to be skeeved by seeing 2 men kissing. I happen to agree. I have the same experience. But I get annoyed. I think the homophobia thing is garbage. And my argument is, if I hate murder, I'm not a murderophobic. If I don't like theft, I'm not a theftophobic. And if I disagree with someone's behavior, it doesn't make me phobic. It just means I have an objection.
Well, the kiss didn't bother me. I completely agree with everything you just said. I mean,
the difference, too, typically is age group. So most men over a certain age who did not grow up in the university environment and the high school environment where LGBT was celebrated would find 2 men kissing to be unappealing. Visually unappealing. I have happened to be part of that group, but there's a lot of younger people that aren't bothered by it. But you are correct. Under any circumstances, to be bothered by something is not to fear it. For example, the greatest example would be Islamophobia in today's world. I am hugely disgusted by Islam. I find Islam absolutely repulsive. And to be openly opposed to the Islamic religion doesn't make one phobic of it, because the religion typically hunts down and kills those who speak out against it. So you have to be the antithesis of afraid. You have to be courageous to stand up against it.
And if you can't stand terrorism, are you a terrorphobic? I mean, is that redundant?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but that's the recrafting. That's the recrafting of our nomenclature in today's world. The nomenclature has literally been recrafted to promote an agenda. Speaking of promoting his agenda,
before we go on quick, can I just say one thing about Michael Sam? Every interview I've seen with him, he seems like a very engaging person. He seems like a great guy. In all reality, everything I've read about him, he seems like a really good guy. I hope that he has nothing but success in the NFL. And like Aaron said, that, 3 months down the line, this is just a non-topic. Because if he goes in the NFL and then they cut him, which is, for 7th round picks,
which is
very likely for 7th round picks,
he'll squawk. He'll squeal.
There'll be a big uproar because he was cut for reasons that aren't true.
If he doesn't get cut and he plays, and because he is either too slow or undersized, he is injured or demoted, we'll hear it as well. Yep. It's just it ought not to be. I think that we're focused on the wrong thing. Speaking of focused on the wrong thing, do you hear that Donald Sterling over the weekend tried to say that he's not a racist, that the only reason he was baited into having that conversation is he, now a married man, 80 years old, he said, I'm trying to have sex with my black girlfriend, and I felt jealous that she was hanging around and taking pictures with younger black men, and I'm just jealous. I was just trying to have sex with her.
Well, if that's the case, then you and Aaron are completely off base about what you were talking about before with a prostitute. She's an escort. He's paying for her company.
Look, the guy is at very least a narcissist and a classist. You know.
Yes, he is. He is.
Yes,
I don't think he is a racist. I think that he's a classist. He is a person that thinks that wealth has made him superior and that all other people are inferior. But I actually don't think he's a racist. So it gets us to the point of, all right, so his comments and most of what he has to say is reprehensible. I personally think that as a married man that I'm trying to bribe a girl that, in addition to giving her $1.8 million, I have to demean myself to the point that I'm begging her to have sex with me, that my $1.8 million is not sufficient, that kind of a person is pretty reprehensible. But should he be forced to give up his NBA team that he's owned for 35 years because of one inappropriate, illegally recorded conversation between he and his prostitute?
Escort. He's paying for a company.
A prostitute, you pay for their company too.
I know.
I guess that the difference would be at $1.8 million, you are you are a high class prostitute. But even at that point, when you are recording illegally your, what do they call the guy that uses the prostitute? They call it John.
I believe so.
Yeah, I think that you're recording your John, you're baiting him into a comment that's going to, and then you're blackmailing him over it. You can't be called high class at that point. So I don't know what the proper terminology is, but should he be required for this egregious conversation to be forced to sell his football team? LeBron James says absolutely that players are not going to tolerate a league with Donald Sterling as an owner. We'll return to Shattering Myths after the commercial break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Interesting question, particularly since this week, Michael Jordan, who I've met, never a nice guy. Mike, I don't think there's anybody that actually has met him or has actually paid attention to his responses, but maybe falls in love with his resume of last-minute shots and championships and Nike Air commercials. He's not a nice guy. He's really hostile towards most everyone.
Look no farther than his Hall of Fame speech.
Right. That's true. Yeah, demeaning people.
Yeah.
Now, and he holds a grudge. And he holds a grudge forever. Michael Jordan said that he was a racist when he, as a young man. Now, he's a guy that we know that he holds grudges forever. Claims to be a racist. Yet no one seems to be bothered by African-American athletes being racially prejudiced against whites, but when an owner says something in a conversation with his high-priced whore, then that's a different story.
In defense of him, on that is that you can change. You can change, and he has been around enough white teammates throughout his NBA career and everything like that. And he's even
he's a guy that shows that he doesn't change.
Well, he has even gone as far as if he thinks that somebody can help him win games, because he drafted Adam Morrison out of Gonzaga, so obviously he's not holding. He might have an opinion on white people, but it's not something that he's holding against them.
On a basketball team or a football team, which are predominantly African American. If a white guy shows up at a skill position, like Wes Welker is going to try to play wide receiver, how is that individual initially received by the majority, not all, but the majority of African-American players?
They're looked at as a kind of a what are you doing here? I don't know. They're not actually going to say anything. But you
Well, they
kinda,
do.
well,
Wes
they
Walker
might.
said they said, what are you doing here, white boy?
Some people might, but let's just say you're going to have to prove that you belong. You have to prove to them that you belong.
That is correct. You do have to prove, and then once you prove them in most sports, you look at the Clippers with Blake Griffin. I think Blake Griffin is loved by that team. In fact, that team is more family probably than any basketball team in a long time, which is interesting. That this would all befall them, because that is an interesting blend. It's majority black, but there's white players on that team that are stars, and that team is family. I mean, they spend a lot of time together, which is the ideal scenario, where skin color ought not matter.
Well, like I told you in the break, in sports, if you can help a team win, they love it. They're not gonna. They don't care if you're, Asian, Jeremy Lin. They don't care if you're black or white. If you can help the team win and you're willing to buy in and be part of a team,
Aaron made an interesting statement though on racism. I asked him. I said, do you think that most African American athletes are racist? And your comment was.
I said there's probably some, but it also depends on what your definition of racism is. I think it's tossed around a little lightly.
Yeah. So if your definition of racism is you have to act upon it, your deeds have to be racist. For example, the Ottoman Turks murdered 1.5 million Armenian Christians. That would cross the line as my deeds are racist.
Most of them.
Yes. But if so you would distinguish between racial deeds and racial words.
Right. When Michael Jordan, the only person saying that Michael Jordan needs to be a racist right now is Michael Jordan. Correct. In a new book that he's promoting as a side note. But yes. He's calling himself a racist, and the only example that I ever see come up, because I haven't bought and read the book, is he threw a cup at a white girl that called him a racial slur. So that's the response that he had.
I would agree with Aaron on that. I think most people, back to the, a white guy stepping onto the field as a receiver or something like that, I wouldn't say they're racist, but they're prejudiced. They prejudge you as you're stepping out there. And
prejudice, by the way, is often wise. There are places where prejudice is wise. Now, judging a person interviewing for a job in business based on their skin color would be stupid. But, for example, if I'm boarding an airplane and there's a guy wearing a turban that is holding a Quran, I'm going to be more concerned with the likelihood that they would attempt to hijack the airplane than I am a little old grandmother that is holding a romantic novel.
Her knitting supplies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even her knitting supplies. So there are times when being discerning, perceptive, actually work on our behalf. Hey, we need to get to the most important story today.